Hey, welcome back to the Urban Monk. Dr. Pedram Shojai hanging out talking about the brain. It is hard to have a functioning brain in today's society. There are so many things that we need to know, from neurotoxins to lack of sleep to watching TV or political rallies. There are many things are mind-numbing and damaging to the brain, in my opinion. So I went and got an expert on the subject. Gary Wenk teaches about the stuff. He's at Ohio State University, professor of psychology, neuroscience and molecular virology and immunology and medical genetics. That's a lot of stuff. So he's probably read a book or two, and I'm so happy to have him here to talk about how we can take better care of our brains. Welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot. Glad to be here.
Yeah, wow. So that is a lot of school. You are teaching things most people don't even know how to pronounce.
Hey, I'm old.
That's what it takes, right? Got to run those miles.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's fun stuff. I love studying it.
Isn't it amazing? And so, the brain is such a top-down control system, but it's also kind of like a feedback loop in an ecosystem. We used to have a very different understanding of the brain. And in just my 40 some odd years here running around on the planet, it has dramatically changed to being kind of like a master control switch box to much, much more. So I'm excited about this. There are, you talk about memories and what they're made of, right? Like how are they made? So these are things that we just didn't even understand.
That's
probably
quite true.
About a decade ago, right?
Right. We've had some insights, obviously. But working out all the details, my God, it takes a lot of time. And that's been a big part of my research. And as we've learned a little bit more about how we make memories, we've also fortunately learned a lot about how we lose memories. And so most of my research has been focused on, normal aging and Alzheimer's disease. So as we've figured out how we make memories and stumbled on the ways of how we lose them, I think we've made some progress in at least getting to the point where we may be able to develop some therapies for people who are losing memories as they get older or have dementia, Alzheimer's disease, that kind of thing. So we didn't expect, I think, that we would make progress on aging as we were trying to figure out how we learn, what a chair is or what the word assassin means, that kind of thing. And all that's happened in the past decades.
That's interesting. I think there's a third bucket we haven't talked about is how we can intentionally lose some memories, but I think that falls in more of the psychology than the neurology, right?
It does, yes, yeah.
Right, and so how are memories made? Like, is this going to get too geeky, or can we get into it? Like, I'm fascinated.
You know what? It doesn't get too geeky too fast. Actually, if you allow me just to go to a simple organism, like the guy who won the Nobel Prize for this was actually working with sea slugs. And they make memories too. They need things that they need to learn, things they need to avoid, and predators they need to avoid. So we learned a lot from simple organisms, and it turned out that we make memories in the same way they do. It comes down to the fact that we have in our brains some things called neurons, which are cells. And their job is to make and break connections between each other. It's still a fair analogy to make comparisons to computers and telephone systems. You hook up wires and you've got connections that you didn't have before. Now we do know that some memories are easier to make, some memories are easier to lose. Really very frightening memories, like PTSD related memories, those hang on a lifetime, and we'd love to get rid of them and find ways to do it, but it's tough to do. And then there are other things we learned, like, the pizza guy's telephone number, and of course that's gone before the pizza arrives. What we've learned is that memories come in a lot of different forms, and different parts of our brain lays down memories in different ways for different regions. So we learn how to ride a bicycle and remember that with one part of our brain. We learn, how to speak English with an entirely different part of the brain. But what we've learned is that the underlying mechanisms are the same. So if we understand, how a person, lays down a memory for life, we can investigate how we can do really fancy, crazy things like give them false memories, which is what you just hinted at a moment ago. We've actually been able to do that with animals, believe it or not. We can give them a memory they didn't have before, and we're getting to the point now with fancy recording equipment that we can listen as animals make their own memories. So it's amazing what progress we've made. But it isn't just enough to understand how a memory is made. We need to take that somewhere. We need to take it to humans and help them either remember better, start having memory impairments more slowly, would be nice, or help them recover memories that they've lost for whatever reason. So there is a lot of clinical applications to working with sea slugs and animals.
Wow. So hold on a second. We now have total recall for doggies. We can give them memories that they didn't have before.
It's actually with rats, but yes,
Sure.
we do.
Wow.
Yeah,
That,
you
that is
got
not, yeah, that is not too far away from I mean, if it could happen with rats, you're assuming, if it came from slugs and
yes.
it's happening with rats, then humans are not that far of a stretch away.
Working our way up to, yeah. Just hold on a
Yeah.
little while.
Okay.
But
Just give it a week. So
we have the ability now to actually listen to animals dreaming, and if we can listen to enough neurons, 400 or 500 in them, we can actually tell what they're dreaming, which is even as much science fiction-y as implanting, false memories.
holy
So we're getting to
shit.
the point that we're learning so much that I think science fiction, as it is many times in the past, is becoming real life.
Wow. So, okay, when we talk about looking at using our kind of current metaphors of hooking up wires,
Mhm.
if I have storage on my laptop in front of me here, there's all these wires and circuits, but then they go to this thing called a hard disk where my memories are stored, type of thing. Is there is it more of a distributed cloud of what's called memories, or is it like the hippocampus is holding things, like how, like where what these things called memories, where the hell do they live, right at the end of the day?
Okay, you just got nerdy before I did with hippocampus, but but yeah, it begins there. All these sensory things. I mean, what's a memory anyway? It's just sight, sounds, tastes. All those kinds of things. They all come together into the hippocampus you mentioned, which sort of lives just inside your ears, and then it's got to go somewhere. And what we've discovered is the various aspects of memory get scattered around. So memory about the sights go to one part, memory about the sounds go to another, and so yeah, we distribute our memories so that we don't lose them. So what we've learned that many times with humans, with injuries, strokes, tumors, and animal studies, that you don't lose all of the memory. In the same way, and you probably noticed this as well, you don't recall all of an entire memory. The point I made in that book you were holding at the beginning is that our brains aren't video or tape recorders. They're not designed, they didn't evolve to record everything and remember it. The idea is that you remember what you need to survive and live long enough to have offspring. So you don't need much memory to do that. Just avoid things that smell like lions and bears and tigers, and go forward towards things that smell like a potential mate or food. Those are pretty
Hmm.
simple memories to gain. So, and we always assume somehow that our memories are perfect, and when they're not perfect, we think there's something wrong with us, and it's just not the case. Our brains never evolved to be the kinds of things that sit in front of you there, that computer, and they don't work the same way. And scientists are trying now to find ways to turn us into the Borg from science, Star Trek,
Yeah.
and we're certainly making progress in that way. But one of the biggest problems is that your computer works in a different pattern than our brain does, and so the challenge isn't the computer power. The challenge is how do we get a computer to talk to our brain in the brain's language? That's what we're learning as well. And
Interesting.
certainly progress is being made. I have a prediction that your grandchildren are going to see that happen, that we will really have true implants where we will communicate to, metallic things that then, tap us into the internet or whatever. There's a lot of progress being made in that area now.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it was my children, not my grandchildren, at this pace.
Yes,
It's just quickening so much.
it really is. Yes.
So I have a grandmother who had really bad Alzheimer's before she passed several years ago, and I mean, it was up front and center. I mean, it was, some of the long-term memory was there. The short-term was just fried, like just fried. And so it was one of those things that I'm very viscerally aware of, is why this research is happening, and how debilitating and how challenging some of these diseases are. And you're on the other side trying to find solutions for it. One of the things that came to mind when you were talking about this, though, is I get a buddy named Jim Quick who teaches memory tricks, right? And one of the things he does, so part of it is like, okay, what did it smell like? What was the color? What was the texture? And as you're saying this, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. You're invoking multi-sensorial type of images and feelings to kind of distribute and put the memory in different parts of the brain so that there can be better recall. It's very interesting how some of these techniques are using all that on the science that you guys are building on.
Sure, and I think it's a great technique. We understand that the brain does take all these things in, and that's, as I said, these memories are linked to each other. So oftentimes, like odors are really good at bringing back memories. You smell a perfume and it reminds you of your grandmother, or certain odors of certain foods or things you hated, or people. So yeah, odors are great cues for us. The interesting thing about odors for us is that we have a really approach avoidance with odors. Most people, it's like, wow, I like that, or geez, I hate that. We don't tend to have neutral things about odors the way we do with sights and sounds. Some music he does not care for. But it is interesting that you can use these tricks to help the brain learn better, using the knowledge you've learned about how memories form anyway.
Yeah. Is part of that potentially because the olfactory system is just old and it's more just kind of like, primitive, like yes, no, type of mammalian response?
Exactly. It's the odor and taste. And if you think about one of the first points I make in the book is, why is the brain in the head? And it's related to your nose and mouth. Organisms put their memory processing stuff up here. They're, the tools they need to find prey or avoid prey and find, food, that kind of thing. It's all at the front of your feeding tube. I mean, we're just feeding tubes. And so we need chemical sensors. And since we evolved in a water environment, chemistry is what we took advantage of. And you mentioned the hippocampus a moment ago. We think the hippocampus evolved for the purpose of sensing odors. I mean, if you think about it, if you're a fish in the water, the chemical hits you a period of time before you actually find the source of the chemical. So you need to remember, here is that odor, and then minutes later, oh, here's the source. It's food. It's a predator. So the hippocampus's job is to connect things in time. And that's what memories are for us. All this sensory stuff comes in, and then we can reuse it some period of time later, like the pizza guy's number. The hippocampus, recalls it. You type the number, and then the hippocampus discards it. So yeah, olfaction is it's a chemical sense. It's the front end of food, and it's what you use to determine what's going in you.
Interesting. And that concept of time and the hippocampus basically just being like a time buffer to hold that scent, hold that chemical until its relevance has kind of worn out. It's like, okay, you got to the source of food or you got away from something. Is really interesting because then it creates a cushion, and then it brings in this other element of kind of the nature of thoughts. Like, do some memories actually last forever? I mean, do we just hold on to them all the way until we're done with our bodies, or are they gone when their utility is gone?
It depends on the memory you have. Most memories are important to us, like what a chair looks like, or what a red appears to be. These things have survival value for us. They last forever. Unlike every other cell in your body, neurons they're not dying. At least you don't want them to die. They're hanging around forever, which puts some limits on us. I mean, we can keep remaking our intestines and our skin, bone, and everything. But neurons, you're born with them. You want to keep them. They make connections. You don't want them to disappear and die, because if they do, the memories go with it. And that's kind of what's happening now. In Alzheimer's disease, neurons aren't necessarily dying. We used to think they did, but it turns out they're really just disconnecting and shrinking. And so if you can avoid the things that make neurons disconnect, the memories aren't lost. And that's what we're trying to do now. My research on aging and Alzheimer's disease has led us to realize that, we start getting dementia very, very young in life. And whether we become demented or not and lose our memories depends a lot on how we lived our lives. We're discovering the connection between diet, food, things like obesity, arthritis, the drugs you took, the drugs you didn't take, those kinds of things. And we're discovering, at least my research is focused on the epidemiology. So, we interview people who are in their 80s and we say, sir, you're not demented. Why? What did you do differently? And obviously genes play a role, but they tell us things. And the answers to that question have been guiding my research now the past 20 years. So we've looked at, when people tell me, well, I drank a lot of beer, or I smoked a lot of cigarettes, or I drank or smoked a lot of marijuana, and you've heard about all these things in the news over the past few decades. We're beginning to follow up on what people tell us, and we're discovering that they were right. They did things differently than their neighbor, and for that reason, they're not getting Alzheimer's disease. That's encouraging for the younger generation.
Yeah,
But
should be.
yeah, but because you can do something about it, and I think that's what's exciting. It's not just because. Well, you mentioned your grandmother. We know that if your grandmother and your mother and your aunt came down with Alzheimer's disease, Alzheimer's tends to follow the female line, so that puts you at risk. But if it had been your grandfather and your uncle and your dad, I would say your risk is pretty low. So if you know that, what do you do about it? Well, what you can is you can look at the epidemiological data, the kinds of things that that I'm doing now, not my research, and you can avoid getting dementia 20, 30 years down the line, because we now understand that people in their 20s and 30s are showing changes in their brain related to learning and memory that predict for us whether you're likely to get Alzheimer's disease. And most docs will say, well, I don't want to tell anyone. I don't want to give them those tests, because what would I do? Well, we're now beginning to say there are things you can do to avoid losing your memory as you get older. And so, take control early.
So that same grandmother, God rest her soul, her husband was at my house last night, who happens to be her only husband, and my grandfather, who is now 101 years old, and is learning Spanish and practicing English and traveling the world, and committed to learning and growing and doing yoga and physical therapy. And knock wood, God bless him. I mean, he is like the opposite, right? He is the specimen of like neuroplasticity and just this growth-oriented mentality. So let's talk about this neuroplasticity thing. I mean, it's trending,
Sure.
right? And so, you're saying that the neurons don't die, but the connection to the neurons starts to get severed, which then creates the memory loss of Alzheimer's. Do you, if the connection is lost, is it gone? So it's just basically preserving what you have, or can you have neuroplasticity? Can you go hook up to if there's like an island of a neuron that kind of got disconnected from, can you reconnect to it, or is that one kind of off the grid now?
It's actually, now that depends on what part of your nervous system we talk about. You asked about the brain, so the answer is pretty dogmatic no. There's a good reason. The brain's awfully complex. And so if you have like a stroke or some traumatic injury or something, the brain, this other cells in the brain, other than neurons, actively discourage rewiring. And now in the periphery, if you severed a nerve in your arm, then that's a pretty simple system. It will attempt to regrow, and neurons grow at about a centimeter a month or so. So if they're injured, you give them time, they'll try and make a reconnection and it'll work. But in the spinal column and in the brain, because of its complexity, what happens is that other cells, they're called astrocytes, actively discourage regrowth. Otherwise, what we find, if you do get regrowth, we get neuromas and we get neuropathic pain, and it's and it never goes away. For whatever reason, when neurons attempt to regrow, they just generate chronic pain. And so people live with chronic pain. It's the most common neurological problem people put up with. So it's a good thing that the brain doesn't try, because it would fail. And the other symptom is usually seizures. If it tries to regrow and rewire, what happens is that seizures develop. And usually those can be lethal. They just get worse and worse. The weird thing about seizures is that seizures is a lot of neural activity, which sounds a lot like plasticity, and it is. They share the same features. So if somebody's having seizures, you want to stop them as soon as possible. You never want to let the seizure keep going over and over and recurring, because it'll come back faster and more often and last longer, be harder to treat. That sounds a lot like plasticity. It is. So our brains can learn to develop seizures until it just takes over. So learning is a double-edged sword. You mentioned a moment ago about your father. We now understand. Let's go back to Alzheimer's and your grandmother for a moment. People who learn 2 languages get Alzheimer's less often than people who only learn 1. But the interesting thing is that if you learn 3 or 4 languages, your incidence of Alzheimer's goes up. Now, people who go to college get diagnosed with Alzheimer's later. They tend to compensate better. But if they do get the dementia, they decay a lot faster. This question always comes up in families. How long is the disease going to last? How fast are they going to decay? And we're beginning to get answers to these questions. So unlike your computer where you can just add on more memory, it's a finite space in your head. So you can overtax things. And so this weird thing of going to college puts me at risk. Well, only if you get the disease. But do you know if you're going to get the disease? No. So what do you tell somebody? We're learning things that are fascinating and may lead to therapies, but at the moment, we're still too ignorant to know what to do with it.
Yeah, that's a tough spot to be in, right? Because someone's coming to you for advice. It's like, I don't know what to tell you yet.
Yeah, I get a lot of emails from elderly folks who say, "Oh, saw your research on this or that." Especially I did research on cannabinoids. And we discovered that people in the 1960s and stuff who are today in their 70s or so are not getting Alzheimer's at the rate that the people who did not smoke marijuana are getting it. Well, it turns out marijuana is a powerful neuroprotectant and anti-inflammatory, and so this is why it protected them when they were younger. But if you're already demented, 60, 70, 80, smoking marijuana is not going to help you. It's too late. I'm sorry. You should have smoked in the 60s. Yeah. But how do you, is a physician really going to suggest to somebody?
Today we know that in California you can. Yeah.
Even in Ohio, we have medical marijuana. Yeah. I'm on the governor's advisory board, but it's only medical. It's not. But we're hoping one day. But all that could change. You mentioned that right in your introduction. Politics and things may change the answers to some of these questions.
Yeah, and the science is pretty clear about the cannabinoids, and so now I looked into this a little while back. Someone was asking me to do a documentary about this whole space, and it was just wild west, and all the big pharma money has come in. I mean, the science is proving to be pretty solid, and so now it's like a gold rush, if you will, and there's all sorts of very big interests getting into the marijuana business.
And there's a lot of money to be made. Now, the drug companies that I'm working with in Europe know that one day, probably 5-10 years from now, it will be legal, recreationally legal in America. They can see that coming. We all can. But they're inventing drugs that Mother Nature didn't think of. So the kinds of things that I'm testing now will make people not even want to bother with marijuana is kind of what they're thinking. Let me give you an example. The one that I just published on last year, little white pill, you take it, nothing happens, you sit there and then you decide, I feel like being high. So you watch a funny movie, somebody tells you a funny joke, and all of a sudden your own endogenous marijuana system takes off and you become as high as your brain is capable of being, which would include hallucinations. And that would last for a few hours until the drug wears off, and then you would come down. This would be you controlling. This is Aldous Huxley's Soma. That's what they're working on.
Wow.
So if you have the choice of burning a plant and inhaling it, or taking a little white pill and controlling every aspect and having pure and complete, 100% stimulation of every cannabinoid receptor in your brain, what would you choose?
Wow.
So a lot of the stuff that we're doing now, with regulating the plant will become moot. I think my prediction is that in 10 years, no one will care.
So it's not even exogenous THC. It's something that helps you regulate your own internal endocannabinoid systems.
Correct. Because those are things that are not planned. You can patent those things. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, interesting. So you talk about a number of things in this research that you've been doing that's fascinating to me. One of which is fear, and so we're starting to understand fear. On a neurological basis, from what I'm getting here. What is fear? I mean, how does one define that?
It's the most important emotion I think people have. It keeps you alive. In terms of evolution, you have to think about how our brain evolved and the environment brains evolved in for the past few 100,000 years. Everything was frightening. Everything could kill you or eat you. You would end up in somebody else's feeding tube way too easily. So if you smell things, a moment ago I mentioned about smell, it's approach avoidance. So if you smelled something and it's unfamiliar, avoid it. Get out of there. If you taste something that's unfamiliar, that's bait shyness. Leave it alone. If you hear a sound that is unfamiliar, you become frightened. If something off to your left was a flash of light and it wasn't expected, you'd become frightened. we inherited a powerful fear gene, and it has allowed us to be on this planet this long. Fear is a great, great thing if you want to survive. And keep in mind, the brain has two jobs. One, keep you alive long enough to two, procreate. That's it, to make more brains. That's its sole purpose. Everything else is, gravy, frosting, whatever you want to call it. So fear means that our species is here. If we were not a fearful species, we wouldn't be here talking. We'd have died long ago. So fear for us is protective. It's great. But sometimes we can remember things, associate them with fearful feelings, and those become PTSD. And now fear enhances memory. So PTSD is a very, very strong memory that it's hard to get rid of. We don't have good ways of doing it. It's psychological. Some pharmaceuticals will help. But that's where we are today. Our brains are designed to take advantage of fearful things and remember them forever.
So
because
someone who lives
yeah,
there, though, so I know people who live in fear, right? And
yes,
they're very fear-driven, fear-oriented, and it's debilitating. What happens with that? I mean, so the natural safeguards, the natural things there are now starting to elicit memories which are capacitating this feeling, or is there something else that's disrupted?
it's probably something else. From using various scanning equipment, and some people have done studies on animals who share that feature. They appear to have inherited a true biochemical difference in their brain, a true wiring difference. They are wired differently. Their chemistry is slightly different than yours. It's a little bit like obese people. Their response to tasting chocolate is actually quite different than people who are not going to, destined to be obese. There's even gender differences. We know that women experience a great deal more euphoria from cocaine than men do, but men are more likely to become addicted to it. It's hard to explain. So our emotional response to just about everything is influenced by our genetics and how that wires our brain and what the chemistry of the brain is. We would discover that some people eat things that make them very fearful. Let me give you an example you might not have heard of. I mentioned this in my last book. It's chocolate anger. It's seen mostly in women. It's inherited. And essentially, you eat a piece of chocolate and you become incredibly frightened, incredibly angry at everyone around you, aggressive. And I've had women, write me and tell me that this is the first time they'd ever heard anybody talk about it, but they suffer with this. And they have to avoid chocolate in any form. And it's not any single ingredient in chocolate. It's an aggregate effect of the chocolate, because the levels of chemicals are awful low. But when you put them all together in a piece of chocolate, if you are vulnerable, you respond with this powerful, fearful anger.
So this is chemically mediated, not like a histamine reaction. So this isn't an allergy to chocolate per se, but there's something within that cocktail of whatever that chocolate is beyond
Yes.
just the cacao that's triggering something in their neurochemistry.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I mean, there's an endogenous amphetamine-like compound, an endogenous marijuana-like compound. There's estrogens, alkaloids. There's an awful lot going on in there. Caffeine-like compounds. So it's an amazing food. If chocolate weren't already legal, it'd probably be, it should be made illegal probably. It's a little bit like we've discovered with Tylenol. For forever, we never knew how Tylenol worked. We knew how aspirin worked. We knew how, ibuprofen worked. We had theories about Tylenol. It's a great drug, it's a safe drug. Hospitals love it. Well, Tylenol is converted into marijuana essentially in your brain. That's why it relieves pain and reduces inflammation a little bit. Here you have a compound from a little white pill that you get at your local Walgreens that once you eat it becomes a drug that enhances your brain's marijuana system. And you can even detect with one, dose of Tylenol, subtle personality, changes in people, if they're vulnerable. So what are we going to do? Make that illegal?
Interesting. So you're saying the willow bark or whatever it is, that the Tylenol is basically triggering the endocannabinoid system, which is then leading to all the kind of anti-inflammatory pain modulation that happens within the brain, and we get the desired effect.
Correct. No, it's not willow bark. It's a very different molecule, but the willow bark is aspirin.
Oh, aspirin.
We discovered Tylenol later. Yeah, yep. But exactly right. Yeah, it's it comes down to your own particular genetic mix. You mentioned your father's still alive, your mother is not. Well, which genes did you get? Did you get his longevity genes or didn't you? We'll have to wait and find
Hmm.
out. But what we're discovering is that it's more complicated than that. One creepy scientific, sort of almost science fiction study was published a couple of years ago with animals where essentially they took very, very young rats and they connected their cardiovascular system to very, very old rats. And essentially they shared blood. That's all, just shared their blood. And it aged the young guys very quickly, and it made the old rats slow their aging, and actually their memories improved. They started, developing some what you might view as anti-aging effects. So what are we saying here?
Be a vampire.
One day, yes, you saw that movie. Yes, are we gonna? Is this where we're going? Are we gonna just, this is scary stuff that we're discovering. So what we want to do now is figure out what the heck is in the blood.
Hmm.
Well, 60% of all the proteins in your blood are made by the bugs that live in your gut. So that now all of a sudden now our gut biome is becoming a trendy topic. So we're paying a lot more attention to it. It determines your depression state, maybe your psychiatric state, and now maybe how fast you age.
Hmm.
We have this symbiotic relationship that goes way back, and at some point they may turn against us.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
this is what we're discovering, but we don't know what to do with it yet. We're not going to we're not going to go out and get a 6-year-old and attach it to you so that you can live forever. That's
Well,
not a
yeah,
solution.
but we are taking a 6-year-old's crap, blending it up, and shooting it up people's butts, right? I mean, there are fecal grafts happening now, and
We
so I
are.
mean, it's happening. It's
It
really,
is.
I mean, it's all right in
We
front of
now have
us.
pills. There are pills now, actually. They're crap pills, indeed. And it's interesting. Why would we do that? Why would we use the crap? Well, it turns out that about 50 to 60% of the dry weight of a person's feces are actually dead bug material. You think about all those bugs, and they're always dying in there all the time. So where do they go? Well, that's it.
Out.
Mostly that's what's in there.
Yeah.
People go, oh my God, those are bugs?
Yep.
You know?
I've actually read studies on some of this fecal grafting, where people's personalities change. Like if you were to take the microbiome out of the Dalai Lama, or someone who's been meditating and doing cool stuff their whole lives, and put it in someone who has like an anxiety disorder, it significantly is improving their state of mind. And so there's just this really interesting, crazy stuff happening around this. And you
It is.
mentioned you talk about depression in your book. What to
Mhm.
you on the neuroscience side, what is depression, right? Like we're starting to get what this is.
Right. Well, it's not about serotonin. Those drugs, that we have out there may block serotonin uptake, but they do a lot of other things as well. So for me, depression is an imbalance of your bugs. It really is. We can see the connection now. We can see the connection between, in other words, depression and all the symptoms of depression they're identical to sickness behaviors that animals show. So we're beginning to realize, we used to call depression, still do, the common cold of mental illness. Well, that's a pretty good analogy. It is due to an imbalance of bugs. Illness in general. We're full of so many bugs. Illness is really just an imbalance of the bugs. So if you take something like an antibiotic that's going to just willy-nilly kill trillions of bugs in your body, you're going to suffer for that. We worry about the consequences of that in adults and young kids, because for a while it's going to alter their bugs. That's going to alter their brain, and if you're young, there'll be a consequence. Now, if you're older and you get the Dalai Lama's, fecal material, will it affect you? For a while, yes. But then your bugs are going to readjust and take you back to the way you were. What we're going to try and find out is, how do we change you for a long time, permanently?
Mm-hmm.
You inherited your bug balance from mom, in the birth canal. How do we change that safely in you? And I think we'll work that out. And when we do work it out, we're going to discover that we're going to have whole new interesting ways of treating things like depression and mental illness.
You mentioned that it's not about serotonin, but much of the serotonergic activity and the synthesis of serotonin happens in the gut level. So are you talking about not the exogenous kind of serotonin that you would take, and that the internal kind of mechanism would be under kind of better balance with the microbiome being in balance? So like where does serotonin fall? Because obviously to a certain extent some of these SSRIs do help and do work. So there's some sort of mechanism that might be within the framework Where's
Mhm.
serotonin fit in here?
Minor role. I've been teaching physicians for decades now. Um, but we tell them that SSRIs treat depression. If you're a physician, that's all you need to know. Fortunately, the FDA doesn't require that we understand mechanisms.
Hmm.
So we're always, something has to be safe and effective. SSRIs are. They're safe generally. They're effective, as you mentioned, generally. When we look back at 50 years of tricyclic antidepressants that were popular, 60s, 70s, early 80s, statisticians tell us that they never benefited anyone. It was all placebo. The one thing, there are two things about human brains that are very sensitive to placebo effect: pain and depression. It may be that 20 years from now, we'll look back at 30, 40 years of SSRIs and those drugs and conclude once again, it was all placebo.
Hmm.
But just in case, we give them the drug. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, people put up with the side effects.
That's amazing.
Um, yes, it's very sad. But that's our level of ignorance today hurts people. It does. Medicine isn't like it is on TV and the movies. But that's what we deal with. We just tell docs, look, if someone has these symptoms, these sickness behaviors, give them this drug. We have discovered that some medications that have nothing to do with serotonin whatsoever still are antidepressants. If I treat the bugs in your gut that have nothing to do with serotonin, I can treat your depression. So I can induce depression in you by affecting systems that have nothing to do with serotonin. So do SSRIs help people? Yes. Is it because of what they do with serotonin? I seriously doubt it. But who cares? People benefit. A couple years ago, we didn't know how Tylenol worked, but it helped people.
Right.
So now we do. Are you
Well,
not going to take it because you don't want to have marijuana enhanced in your brain?
I mean, this gets into a kind of a sticky, bigger conversation around the who cares, because some guy's paying $1,200 a month for some drugs that may or may not be helping. It's probably placebo, but who cares? And then we get into all these
Hmm.
wars over healthcare costs, right? And at the end of the
Right.
day, someone's paying for this shit. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
this is the challenge with this whole thing is the wheel of medicine and the wheel of science is a
Hmm.
very slow turning wheel until we can
Very
definitively
much.
say this is the answer, right?
Right.
But
And
in
we never
that
do.
in that delta, yeah, and we hardly ever do. And so in that delta comes this enormous pharmaceutical industry that's just like, fuck it, let's just sell them this stuff in the midterm, and once they come around to it, we've had 40 years of profit.
Right.
Did it help? Did
We've
it
seen
not?
that many times, and it'll happen again and again. For example, in Colorado, let's go back to marijuana. Recreational marijuana is legal. It turns out that oxycodone and Vicodin overdoses and heroin overdoses have gone way down because people are not treating their pain with opiates in Colorado. They're using
Hmm.
marijuana
Hmm.
because it's easy to get. Well, two big pharmas are losing millions of dollars in Colorado alone because they're not selling Vicodin and oxycodone and all those other synthetic opiates. But people are living. People are not dying from heroin overdoses.
Hmm.
So who are the biggest funders for against marijuana legalization in other states? These big pharmas. They're losing money.
Interesting.
So yeah, and that wasn't published in American journals. It was a British medical journal. You're right. We're fighting against people who would like to sell us something that's going to hurt us.
Yeah.
Um, and that's where we are right now in medicine. We're very ignorant. I spend a lot of time teaching docs to get comfortable with ambiguity. They never know if they're helping. They never know why they're helping sometimes. But that's medicine today.
Well, there's also a different kind of paradigm that's emerging with this functional medicine realm, where people are using food as medicine, people are using lifestyle as medicine, and there is this shift into lifestyle medicine and kind of better look at interventional stuff and predictive medicine and all that. But I can't tell you how many texts or IMs I get a week of people saying, "Do you know any functional medicine doctor in my area?" I'm like, where the hell are these people? Right? Like,
Oh,
everyone's on Main Street pimping drugs, and there's very few
right.
functional medicine docs who are looking at this
They're
stuff.
not being trained. Actually, part of the reason when I wrote the book, hate people that say those things. Your brain on food. I wanted to write more about that. The data doesn't exist. No one is out there prescribing foods as medicines for the simple reason there's no money to be made in doing it.
Hmm.
There's no one trained to do it.
Hmm.
So when I went looking for the information to try and put it in that book, it didn't exist.
Yeah.
We don't know. Yeah, we can say some things about food and fats and carbohydrates and things, but we have complicated diets. So just isolating single factors is tough.
Yeah.
You know, look at where we are today.
Yeah. Well, and the cocktail is very, very complicated. And so, one of the things that you look at with fecal grafts and all this is, why don't we take a Hiroshima size antibiotic dose, wipe out
Hmm.
everything that made you what you are today, clear all karma presumably, and then take some
Oh God.
take some Dalai Lama poop and start over. It's like being a born again Christian in the health realm, right?
Right.
And that's a strategy that I know people are looking
You
at.
know.
I'm not sure how well it's been working. I've seen some mixed data on it.
Oh boy. We do occasionally give people that many antibiotics, and the outcome is ugly because no one gets the fecal transplants. And I don't think anyone was aware, but that may be tried. That's akin to that science fictiony thing of attaching your self cardiovascular system to a young, organism, child, whatever it might be. There are things that build up in the aging brain, aging body that we probably want to get rid of.
Yeah.
And maybe it comes through the diet. Why not?
Yeah. Why not?
Everything else is that way. Yeah. And I mean, there's so many things in a human's diet, and this is what makes it so hard
One of
to isolate.
my best friend's mother's a psychologist from old school Russia, and
Hmm.
she's been on this stuff for years, just talking about like just fasting and water fasting and just some of this ancient stuff that like cleans out the gut. And they were using this in Russia for psychiatric illness, and just
Hmm.
putting people on cleanses and fasts, and all of a sudden schizophrenia and all sorts of crazy stuff would start to suddenly alleviate. And so the Russia cared because they were paying the bill, right? And so their
Right.
science wasn't usurped by a pharmaceutical industry the same way then. I don't know what the hell's happening in Russia now. Well,
A lot of it. Yeah, a lot of their data we couldn't trust, but I don't know specifically. That
right,
was part of the problem. But
right,
my TED when I did a TED talk, and that was one of my main points was essentially stop eating so much. That's really so important. People, they say, how can I slow down aging? It's easy. We've known it for 50 years. Stop eating so much. And so they say, well, God, I exercise, and it's like, no, 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 you didn't hear me. Stop moving. Stop eating. We do live on a planet with gravity. Yeah, you got to do some things to strengthen your bones, but you do have a heart and cardiovascular system. You got to move around a little bit, go for a walk. But the key thing is, well, I'll give you an example. If you take two identical twins, and one of them, like some of my students, eat 5,000 calories a day because they're swimmers or basketball players, and their twin, ate 1,500 calories a day, they always ask the question, who lives the longest? And the answer is easy. The person who ate the fewer calories always lives longer. So I don't care what you
interesting,
look like. If you take in fewer calories in your life, you're going to age a lot slower and you're going to live a
interesting.
lot longer. All things being equal, given your genes and your situation, you're going to live the longest you are capable as an individual of living. Are you going to live longer than 117 or 18 years? No, but you're going to be healthier during the years you do have. You
So
know,
caloric
so
restriction, we've known for 50 years,
oh
is
yeah.
the key to longevity.
And what we have only known a few years was, you don't want to treat us like we're just a blast furnace. It isn't quite that simple, but it's close. What we also discovered is that we live on a planet that spins in front of the sun. So our bodies pay attention to biorhythms. So it does matter when you eat those 1,500 calories. So somebody did a study to ask the question, what if I ate 2,000 calories, but ate them at a certain time period? Turned out that mattered, which is surprising to anyone. It shouldn't matter, but it does matter a lot. So you take an individual, genetic identicals, 2,000 calories, or let's say 3,000 calories a day, and you have them eat a massive breakfast, breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper, and they stop eating by 4 p.m. Seems early. And never eat again until the next morning at 7 a.m. or something like that. Turns out those people are not as hungry. They don't have insulin stress. They're less likely to get diabetes. Even though they're eating 3,000 calories, they don't gain weight. Whereas the person who ate the 2,000 calories at dinner, the way most Americans do, was hungry all day, felt like snacking all day. They skipped breakfast, thinking they'd save some calories. They gained weight. So it turns out, yeah, eat fewer calories, eat them early in the day of your biorhythm, and you're not going to be hungry for so eat a big, massive, 10 donut, bacon, multi-egg breakfast. I don't care what you're eating. From what we can tell, just eat it early.
Interesting.
Um,
Big breakfast.
yeah,
So
so
the
just
only
that.
other challenge with that is stretching the abdomen, right? Because if you're just having smoothies and stuff, and then you got a really small, you don't have that much room, it's easier
Right.
to do so. You eat a big breakfast in the morning, then you're just hungry again at a certain point.
Actually, what's interesting is that when they did the study, it takes them longer to report hunger, and they don't feel like eating as much at lunch.
Interesting.
So yeah, give it a try. These studies, they actually looked at blood levels of insulin, growth hormone, those things to see what happens is that your body is set to use the food in the morning when you first get up after that long fast. So it uses it apparently differently. We do not understand why the same number of calories don't add on to the same amount of weight, but biorhythm plays a role. So yeah,
I,
two
lo-
things. Not surprising.
I love how the book is called "The Brain: What Everyone Needs to Know." And what we're talking about is so many things other than the brain, because that's the complex ecosystem that is this thing called life that we now live in, right?
Exactly. You can't talk about the brain without talking about these things. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so, we used to compartmentalize. It was the brain did this, the liver did this, and everyone had their jobs, and everyone was just, it was this mechanistic kind of Newtonian
Mhm.
universe.
It was. Yeah. So
And
when somebody has a liver failure and they undergo a liver transplant, with the liver failure, they have memory problems, dementia-like symptoms. They get a fresh, younger liver, their memory impairs again. So, all of a sudden, lots of examples are beginning to show up that, the brain's connected to the rest of the body. Who's surprised? But and the gut, and the bugs that live in the gut, and the proteins those bugs make for us. And if they're messed up, then we start feeling pretty bad. So I think that holistic approach is what science today is beginning to provide evidence for. We just don't have the details worked out yet.
yeah, yeah. Well, here's the thing: is the industry and the science behind all of it might not have it worked out yet, but I've already taken away a number of things. I'm gonna stick to my big breakfasts and eat more vegetables and stay away
Yes.
from neurotoxins and probably smoke a little more pot. I'm trying to think of all the takeaways I have from here.
Well, if you smoke cigarettes, don't
Don't do that.
drink 6 cups of coffee a day. By the way, critical. We know that. One of the things about cigarettes always surprises people. Nicotine is very neuroprotective, and cigarette smoke is the most powerful, most common heavy metal chelator that we expose ourselves to.
Chelator.
So if you're a farmer and you're around pesticides and heavy metals in the fertilizers you're working with, people who live in rural environments in America have the biggest risk of getting Parkinson's disease. So we've learned that smoking cigarettes prevents Parkinson's. Drinking 6 cups a day of coffee prevents Parkinson's for all intents and purposes. Now, so if you're growing up, in rural Kentucky or here in Ohio, and you're out on the farmland somewhere, you better be smoking and drinking coffee. Otherwise, you're doomed for Parkinson's. Um, is this what you're going to tell people as a physician? No. We've known that for decades. In fact, there was a movie not long ago called Thank You for
Thank
Smoking."
you for smoking.
Where
Yeah.
yeah, and there's a throwaway line by one of the lawyers that said, "Well, we all know that smoking prevents Parkinson's," and I don't think anybody watching that movie believes it, but that's true. And when you control statistically for lung cancer and other things, if you are at risk of Parkinson's, it will prevent it. And we understand why, but we don't have good substitutes
I have
that
friends.
aren't.
I have friends that take nicotine supplements or the what is it
Oh, the sprays or
the
patches.
sprays
Yeah,
and stuff. Yeah, for the neurodegenerative kind of offset. Just because of
yes,
that, right? I mean, I have people that read this
yeah,
research and are like, okay, well, I don't want lung cancer, but I'm going to take nicotine, and
right.
so a lot of brain guys do this.
I think that's a part of that. That'll be part of the future. We're going to get have sprays or patches that we'll wear that are designed for your genes that will protect you from the things your lifestyle. So people who live in big cities get schizophrenia more often than people who live on the farm. So maybe if you're at risk, you might want to wear this particular patch. So medicine's changing a lot. We're paying much more attention to your genes. We're going to diagnose you by your genes and your symptoms rather than giving you some title that you're a paranoid schizophrenic. No, no, no. These are your genes. These are your symptoms. Therefore, this is what we do for you.
I love
It'll
it.
be way more informed.
You know, there's something cool about being alive in the era when we're still trying to get it all figured out, because I feel like, you know, if we don't like kill each other and like nuke each other and destroy the planet in the next couple of generations, we're going to kind of have it figured out, and medicine's going to look very different.
We'll live a long time. We'll look like the Borg. We'll all know everything about everything at all times. It's kind of encouraging and scary at the same time. You know,
walking around drinking Dalai Lama poop smoothies.
Right. I'm not sure we'll need them. We'll have a 6-year-old attached to our back and I don't know what. It's a crazy world. You know what? I think I'm glad to be alive now, because that world's maybe too crazy.
Yeah, no kidding. And we can look at what we maybe steer clear of. Gary, this has been delightful. I didn't know what to expect. We were talking about the brain, but we talked about like everything, and so I really enjoyed the breadth of your knowledge. It's been really fun.
No, it's fun for me. You can see why I enjoy studying it and teaching. Yeah. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
This has been great. The book, again, is called The Brain, What Everyone Needs to Know. Gary Wenk, W-E-N-K. Check it out. What a cool guy. I'd love to have you back, and I wish you the best of luck. And you got new research. Send it my way. I'm super interested in this stuff.
I'll do that. All right.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Pedram Shojai, the Urban Monk. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time.